kind of narrated by our good friend here, Tony Sarhoff. So Tony, come on up, sir. Welcome. Great to have you. Okay, I think we can take the middle two seats. All right. Tony, we had a little bit of chat before this, and the role that has been traditionally the coordinator plus all that you bring in. Let's start with that, a little bit of your background, your introduction, and what you, and then we can get into what you have been up to, across the state.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Val. Good morning, everyone. My background, I'll go quick. I started out about 29 years ago. I enlisted in the Air Force and got started in communications and communications security at then. We didn't call it cybersecurity or even IT at that point, but that's where I started. I spent about 6 years in the Air Force. I got out of the Air Force and spent quite a few years in the private sector, in the vendor community as a network and security engineer, supporting customers all over this area, all over Texas. And then I went, was doing some work for the Marine Corps in New Orleans, which led to me taking a position there. So I spent some time working for the Marine Corps. Then I was most recently CISO for the Fifth Circuit of the Federal Judiciary, which covers Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, the federal courts across the three-state circuit. And about 9 months ago, back in January, I made the move to come back, because I was in New Orleans, to come back home to Texas to take the position of state cybersecurity coordinator. So
that's quite a journey, and I think it's the current role you are in has also been through quite a journey, right? I mean, I remember Brian Engel, when that was probably the most well-known cyber coordinator at the time, and then Nancy, and then now you. And when we caught up, it looks like that role has expanded, and you have a pretty huge mandate. Tell us a little bit about your role.
Yeah, so as the state cybersecurity coordinator, my focus is primarily on those entities in the state that are not state agencies, right? Not the state government itself, but everything else. And it's a lot. When we talked and we talked about the state of the state, what does the state mean? It depends on who you're talking to. I learned early on, and when I first came into the role, that when a lot of folks say the state, they're talking about the state government and the 200-ish agencies that make that up. When I think about the state, talk about the state, I'm talking about the state as a whole. And so my focus is everything else. When we have a large state right here in Texas, and we have 254 counties, we have over 1,200 cities, we have over 1,200 independent school districts, and all the other public entities out there. We have a little over 7,200 independent public local government entities across the state of Texas. And so those entities make up the scope or the primary area where I focus my efforts.
That's that would be overwhelming for anyone, but how are you seeing the traction?
Yeah, so when you think about, we have 7,000 plus entities out there. Most of them, I'm sure we can all easily imagine, are not like San Antonio, right? Sure. And they don't have the things going on that are happening in San Antonio in the area of cybersecurity. There's not the funding, there's not the excitement, there's not the leadership involvement and leadership buy-in out there across most of these entities. And, right. And unfortunately too, when we've heard from some folks in the federal government, military, entities like that, there are enough requirements in place that regulations in the private sector, requirements in larger government, federal government entities, state level, there are enough requirements in place for the larger entities that leadership buy-in isn't necessarily required. Right, to have an okay cybersecurity.
It's an organizational requirement, and you have to do it.
Right, you have to. But out in these 7,000 plus local entities across Texas, they don't have those requirements, right? Texas is a very federated state.
Yes.
There's not a appetite at the state level to put requirements on the local entities. So they don't have these requirements in place that are forcing them to do certain things. And the leadership buy-in is not there, and no effort's been made. So things don't look very, very good out there across the state when you get out of areas and central hubs like San Antonio. And so I spend my time focusing on those folks. And I spend a lot of time, Val, talking to a target, right? Because it started out initially, I'm the state cybersecurity coordinator. So folks want to have me come out and talk to regional conferences around the state when they get their IT and cybersecurity folks together. And I do some of that, but I said, no, I would like to talk to your county judges, your mayors, your county commissioners, and those kinds of folks that don't normally have a cybersecurity component to their conferences when they get together, right? I want to target those folks, and those are the folks that I'm targeting, and trying to open their eyes to the risk that they own, right? And in terms that make sense to them. I'll share a story, and I share this a lot. I share with these audiences when I talk. In my previous role, I was in the federal judiciary, the CISO. And as I traveled around the circuit over a few-year period and visited courts, by the way, they had the same problem as our local entities do here, right? The courts and the federal judiciary, they're all individual entities. They used to call them fiefdoms. And so it's hard to tell a presidential appointed lifetime chief judge, what they have to do in their court. And so there was a lot of convincing. And as I was making my rounds across the circuit, one of the things I was doing was facilitating tabletop exercises, and the courts didn't know what they were. So each time I did one with a court for the first time, it was the first time they had done one. And we had conversations in advance, and I always recommended some audience members to participate in these tabletop exercises. Sure. And each time I went for the first time, it was just the IT and the security staff. They weren't able to pull in anyone else.
It's a cyber thing, and they'll take care of it.
It's a cyber thing, exactly. But I went to one, and it was a court in Louisiana, and I met with the IT director when I first walked in, and he said, the clerk heard you were coming today and wanted to say hi before we get started. And I always ask this question because does everyone know who the clerk is at a federal court? I asked because I didn't know. I spent a long time trying to stay out of courts. And so the clerk is like the CEO of a court. And so everyone works for the clerk. And so the IT director says the clerk wants to say hi. So we stopped by the clerk's office, and he asked, what are you doing today? And I told him we were going to start out with a tabletop exercise. And he said, well, I have about 15 minutes. Do you mind if I sit in? And I said, sure. I said, it's your courthouse. Yeah. Come on. So we go into this big conference room and get set up around the table, and there was a line of chairs against the side wall by the door that the clerk went and sat over there. And I said, come on. I said, we've got plenty of room at the table. And he said, no, I'm going to sit by the door. I only have about 15 minutes. So we started, and right about the 15-minute mark, and I was kind of watching the clerk out of my corner of my eye to see how he was taking this in. And right about the 15-minute mark, he stood up, and I wasn't sure if he was leaving or what. Yeah. He came over and he sat down at the table. And at about the 30-minute mark, he was at that point the most active participant in the discussion from all the court staff. And he stayed for the whole 2.5-hour tabletop exercise. There you go. I don't know what he had on his calendar that morning, but he blew it off. And I like this. I say, there were so many things that in his position, so many things that he needed to know and wanted to know about cybersecurity that he never knew he needed to know and never knew he wanted to know, right? Absolutely. But it was that discussion that opened his eyes to that. And ever since, he is involved in the conversation, and it's changed the cybersecurity posture.
There you go. You have a model that can go across the board. And I think, that's where 7,000 entities or 240 counties, all of that come together. Maybe I bring up, last time I was here in San Antonio and live in person on a conference was the ISAC conference that Dr. Greg White hosted. And that was at the same time around 3 school districts got, hacked. And I think a lot of people don't register that the same responsibility to the county judge, being the acting person and making the issuance. Can you tell us about the operational model that people need to know, especially in the industry? Unless and until I started working on a breach on a school level, I didn't know how this operated. So and I'm sure that's one of the narrative, understanding the system. that you're going to solve and serve? And any thoughts and insights you can provide to that operational model?
On the operational side, the state, again, back to the independent model that we are in Texas, and each entity is independent. The state isn't necessarily involved in responses across these 7,200 plus entities. We recently have stood up. I could talk about a couple of initiatives that we have, but from a response standpoint, we do have a statewide CERT team now that is there as a resource, as an incident response resource for these entities, and they have been helping school districts and counties and cities and other entities, and actually have been able to deploy some folks as well. So that's a capability that's in place today. Going back to August of 2019, there was a ransomware incident that impacted 23 local government entities across the state of Texas, and that elevated to the level of requiring state level support. That was a pretty wide ranging response effort. But those entities were spread across the state, and again, Texas, we're a big state. But the response, the boots on the ground response, all came out of Austin. So it took some time to get folks out. So some lessons learned that came from that. There are a couple of new programs that we have going. One is a VERT, or a volunteer incident response team. So we're at about 68 members today. Last couple of days, last I heard. But the idea is to have some volunteers from across the state.
And this is individual, or
these are individuals.
Okay.
These are individuals. Going back to that incident in August of 2019, there were volunteers that came out, companies, individuals. There was no mechanism in place to turn folks immediately into agents of the state and send them out and have them do work on behalf of the state, right? So the program was built, and now that background work is being done, background checks, the vetting, making these folks officially agents of the state, that they can be activated by the governor. So we've got that capability in place, and that continues to grow. We have also started an RSOC program, or a regional SOC program. Ultimately, it will be up to 12. That final number hasn't been determined yet, but they will be in different regions across the state. The first one has been stood up. The pilot, it's being stood up right now. Angelo State University out in San Angelo, and these are all being done in partnership with universities. Right. So they will provide SOC services to local government entities in their region, and again, there will be up to 12 of these assigned around the state with different universities, and they're going to be staffed primarily by students. So they're going to provide these SOC services to local entities out there that don't have these services available to them today. And they're also going to be a big part of working on that workforce development problem.
Absolutely. That's all of you, Joe. Students,
exactly. I smiled big when I saw them walk in.
Yeah.
Very glad to see you all here.
Well, I think, if you think and reflect upon the entities at the state and local level, and you compare to the small businesses, the problems are similar, right?
I think so. I was thinking that when the last panel was talking, that the problems are similar. I think that I'll accept that. My sense is that that owner of that small business versus that county judge, that owner is more, understands the problem more and wants to do something about the problem more. So that is in place already. They just don't have the resources to have a SOC and a large staff, right? So they're looking for other ways to do that. I think that's the difference. And there's probably no need to convince that small business owner that cybersecurity should be a priority.
Oh, you would think so, but yeah,
right.
But definitely there is a operational model, systemic issue that's there that needs to be resolved. I think that should start from peer-to-peer education. Right. I think that's where small businesses and we focus so much on the chamber, because they come and talk at the chamber, and that's their forum to share knowledge. So if we can reflect that on this local side, where do you think that convening forum is, where we can?
So we're promoting a lot of that out in the regions. We have regional COGs across the state of Texas, which councils of government. We have 24 COGs across the state of Texas, and we're promoting more of that working together within those regions, led by the COGs. We also have the Texas ISAL that my team manages, the Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, and that is open to every public and private sector entity in Texas. We currently have about 2,000 members. We should have way more. I already mentioned we have 7,200 public entities out there. If we only had one person from each of those, we'd have over 7,000 members of the ISAL. So we have a long way to go, a long way to grow when it comes to the ISAL. But we have monthly, we share a lot of information, right? We send out regular bulletins and alerts to the community, to the members. We have a monthly meeting where we always have a guest speaker. We always have UTSA as a partner. UTSA always provides an educational briefing for our monthly meetings. The Texas A&M is also a partner, and they always provide a threat intel update in our monthly meetings. And we have the ability for our members to report threat information that can be shared out to the other members. So we're building out this information sharing organization that is very powerful, and a tool that these small businesses, again, they're eligible. They should take advantage of. One new feature I like that we just started, if I could mention, the state SOC at the state level, the SOC for all the state agencies. You know, they've been in place for years, and they block roughly 1 billion malicious connection attempts a day. But in their work, you know, every single day they're identifying IOCs, malicious IP addresses, malicious domain names, file hashes, and they're identifying these things every day and adding to their block lists of their equipment that protect the state agencies. And they've been doing that forever. Well, just a couple of months ago, we started taking those IOCs that they're identifying daily, and we're rolling that up and sending that out as a weekly report to all of our ISAL members. So all of it, threat intel information can be expensive, right?
Yeah.
From third-party providers.
Talk about our commercial partners.
We're sending this out for free to all of our ISAL members, and you can imagine, you know, there are 2,000 members. I'm sure there are plenty of those members that are so far that have received these reports and don't even know they're receiving them yet, right? Because they just are ignoring the emails. There are some folks, I'm sure, that are receiving these reports that haven't known what to do with them. But we do know, because we've been told, that there are some folks out there that are receiving these reports and have gone and done some threat hunting in their own networks and found some of these IPs active in their networks. So it's working. It's valuable intel. It's actionable intel. And just one of the new services that we're providing through the ISAL.
Absolutely, and I think that's great, because, you know, all of this adds up, right? Each of the components, you know, you're sharing information, you're making sure that you are there to interpret it for them. I remember you still saying that you're the chief interpreter, right, as much as the coordinator,
right?
So how can private sector get engaged with you? I think the voluntary incident response team, of course, is individual and people can get in, but how can our commercial partners and private sector, you know, one thing, understand, appreciate the problem, but also engage with the state?
Yeah, so the ISAL is a good way to start there. I've got information on the ISAL if you want to grab me after this. At DIR's webpage, you could just search ISAL on there. It will take you to the sign-up link. The ISAL is a good way to get engaged. Again, open to public. Unfortunately, there's a lot more available from the state to public sector entities than there is private sector, right? Obviously. But we are trying, we are making an effort, you know. It was talked about public-private partnerships, and we focus on that as much as we can. I'm also the chair of the Texas Cybersecurity Council, and that is a group of public and private sector leaders from across the state that come together to that ultimately the mission of the council is to make recommendations to the legislature that more often than not become law in Texas.
Yeah.
So that's a way for private sector to be engaged, directly involved with what the state's doing when it comes to cybersecurity. But reach out. I would say just reach out. You know, let's talk. Let's see what we can do. You know, get involved in the ISAL, and let's see where it goes.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, CFF being a platform of sharing, you know, knowledge, leadership, and helping each other, I think this is a great opportunity to actually join the voluntary incident response team, join the ISAL, and contribute, and that's how you can actually lift up your own community. I mean, the state and the communities and the entities, they serve us and we fund them, right? So it's something that's your right, and also a duty, a civic duty to support those institutions that really need help. Tony, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I've really learned a lot, and I think, again, start of a journey. Hopefully we can work together towards something.
Thank you, Val.
Thank you. Please give it up.